In a small wooden house in the suburbs, an old woman sat quietly by the fireplace when a sudden, insistent knocking startled her awake. She went to the window and saw a snow-covered man clutching his frail 8-year-old daughter pleading for help. Memories of the blizzard 3 years earlier filled her with fear of strangers, but despite her trembling hesitation, she decided to open the door. She let them in, led them to warm themselves by the fireplace and offered them a cup of hot tea. What she didn't know was that the man she had just helped was a billionaire, and this simple act of kindness would change her life forever. Before we dive into the full story, tell me where you're watching from and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss more stories of kindness every day. The wind howled like a wounded animal across Silver Pine Ridge, rattling the windows of Eleanor Price's cabin with such force she thought the glass might shatter. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and edged closer to the fireplace, the only source of light now that the power had gone out an hour ago. The flames cast dancing shadows across the worn wooden walls, and she could see her breath misting in the air despite the fire's warmth. 72 years on this earth, and Eleanor had seen plenty of Colorado winters, but this one felt different, meaner. The kind of storm that buried everything under feet of snow and didn't apologize for it. She flexed her fingers slowly, wincing as the arthritis sent sharp pains through her knuckles. The cold always made it worse. On nights like this she could barely hold a coffee cup, let alone do anything useful. She thought of Harold, how he used to massage her hands on winter evenings, his strong fingers working the stiffness out of hers. That was before the stroke took him 6 years ago. Before she learned what it meant to be truly alone. The cabin creaked and groaned under the wind's assault. Eleanor reached for another log to add to the fire when suddenly, a sound cut through the storm's roar. Bang, bang. Someone was pounding on her front door. Eleanor froze, the log halfway to the flames. Her heart began to race, each beat painful against her ribs. Bang, bang, bang. The pounding came again, more desperate this time. Then a man's voice, muffled but frantic, shouting against the wind. Please, help us, my daughter. She's freezing. Eleanor's hands began to shake, and it wasn't from the arthritis. She set the log down carefully and stood, gripping the arm of her chair for support. Her mind was already racing backward, pulled against her will to that night 3 years ago. It had been winter then too, not as cold but dark. A young man at her door, maybe 30, with a friendly smile and apologetic eyes. His car had broken down, he'd said. Could he just use her phone, maybe warm up for a minute? Eleanor had been lonely then. Harold had been gone 3 years at that point, and she'd welcomed the company, even from a stranger. She'd opened the door wide, invited him in, put the kettle on for tea. He'd waited until her back was turned. Then she'd felt the cold press of a knife blade against her throat, and heard his voice, no longer friendly, telling her not to scream. He'd taken everything. The cash she kept in the kitchen drawer, Harold's watch, her grandmother's silver candlesticks, even the wedding ring she'd slipped off to wash dishes, sitting by the sink. The police had been kind but useless. No fingerprints, no witnesses, no leads. The man had vanished into the night, and Eleanor had been left with empty drawers and a heart full of fear. She'd sworn then, sitting in this very cabin with the locksmith changing all her locks, that she would never open her door to a stranger again. Never. Bang, bang. Please, anyone. She's not breathing right. Eleanor's legs carried her toward the door before her mind could stop them. She pressed her face close to the small window, peering through the frost that had built up on the glass. The candles behind her provided just enough light to see. A man stood on her porch, covered in snow, his coat soaked through. In his arms, he held a small child, maybe 7 or 8 years old. The girl's face was flushed red, her head lolling against the man's chest. Even from here, Eleanor could see the child shivering violently. Please, the man shouted again, and now Eleanor could see tears freezing on his cheeks. I know you don't know us, but my little girl, she's sick, and we're lost, and I don't know what else to do. Eleanor's hand moved to the lock, then stopped. Her whole body trembled. The memories crashed over her. The knife, the theft, the weeks of nightmares afterward, the way she jumped at every sound for months. But the child, that little girl in the man's arms. No, Eleanor whispered to herself. No, I can't. What if it's a trick? What if there's someone else waiting? What if, the girl coughed, a wet, rattling sound that Eleanor could hear, even through the door and the storm. The man pressed his daughter closer to his chest, trying to shield her from the wind. Eleanor closed her eyes. She saw Harold's face, the way he'd looked at her on their wedding day. She heard his voice, gentle but firm. "Ellie, you've got the biggest heart of anyone I know. Don't ever let the world make you lose that." But Harold had never been robbed at knife point. Harold had never known what it felt like to have everything stolen, to feel violated in your own home. The girl coughed again, weaker this time. Eleanor's hand shook as it gripped the deadbolt. Everything in her screamed to leave the door locked, to call out that she couldn't help, to wait until morning, when surely someone else would find them. But morning might be too late. With a sound that was half sob, half prayer, Eleanor threw the deadbolt and yanked the door open. The wind immediately tried to rip the door from her arthritic grip, and snow blew into the cabin. The man nearly fell forward, catching himself at the last second. "Thank God," he gasped. "Thank God. Thank you, please. Get inside," Eleanor said, her voice harder than she intended. She stepped back, clutching a walking stick she'd grabbed from beside the door. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. Quickly, the man stumbled inside, the girl still clutched in his arms. Eleanor slammed the door shut against the wind and threw the bolt home with shaking fingers. For a moment, the only sound was their heavy breathing and the crackling of the fire. Eleanor backed up several steps, the walking stick held firmly in front of her. The man stood just inside the door, dripping melted snow onto her floor, his arms wrapped protectively around his daughter. Now that they were in the light, Eleanor could see them more clearly. The man was in his mid-30s, with dark hair plastered to his head and exhaustion written in every line of his face. His clothes, though soaked, looked well made. The girl wore a pink winter coat that was far too thin for this weather, and her blonde hair hung in wet tangles around her fever-flushed face. "Thank you," the man said again, his voice cracking. "I'm Michael Grant. This is my daughter Lily. We were driving to Glenwood Springs when the storm hit. The car went off the road about 2 miles back. I tried to wait it out, but Lily, she's been sick for 2 days and it was just getting worse, and—" "Stop," Eleanor interrupted, her voice sharp. She tightened her grip on the stick. "Don't move from that spot. Don't touch anything." Michael's eyes widened, but he nodded. Okay, we won't. I promise, we just need to get warm. Please." Lily stirred in his arms and let out a weak whimper. "Daddy, I'm cold." "I know, sweetheart. I know. We're inside now. You're going to be okay." Eleanor's heart twisted at the girl's voice, but she kept her distance. "Put her down by the fire, slowly, then sit in that chair." She pointed to the armchair farthest from the door, farthest from her bedroom, farthest from anything valuable. "Don't get up unless I say you can." "Yes, ma'am," Michael said quietly. He knelt by the fireplace and gently set Lily down on the rug. The girl curled into a ball immediately, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Michael moved to the chair Eleanor had indicated and sat, his hands visible on his knees. "We won't cause any trouble, I swear. We'll leave as soon as the storm passes." Eleanor didn't answer. She kept the walking stick in one hand and backed toward the hallway closet. Without taking her eyes off Michael, she fumbled behind her for the door handle, opened it, and pulled out 2 old blankets. She tossed them toward the fire. "Wrap her up," she ordered. "Get those wet clothes off her first." Michael moved quickly but carefully, always aware that Eleanor was watching his every move. He helped Lily out of her soaked coat and wrapped her in both blankets. The girl's shivers didn't stop, but they became less violent. Eleanor watched as Michael tucked the blankets around his daughter with gentle, practiced hands. The way he checked her forehead for fever, the way he whispered reassurances that everything would be all right, the tenderness in every movement. It didn't look like an act. But then again, the man 3 years ago hadn't looked dangerous either. "I'm going to make tea," Eleanor announced. "You stay right where you are. If you move from that chair, I'm calling the police." She had no phone service, but he didn't need to know that. "We won't move," Michael promised. "Thank you, really, you saved our lives tonight." Eleanor didn't respond. She backed into the kitchen, keeping them in sight as long as possible. Only when she absolutely had to turn her back did she finally look away to fill the kettle and set it on the gas stove. Her hands shook so badly she nearly dropped the matches. In the living room, she could hear Michael speaking softly to Lily, could hear the girl's occasional coughs, could hear the storm still raging outside. trapping them all together in this small cabin. Eleanor leaned against the counter and closed her eyes briefly. What had she done? What had she just let into her home? But when she opened her eyes and looked back into the living room, all she saw was a father holding his sick child close to the fire, both of them looking more like refugees than threats. She turned back to the stove and waited for the water to boil, the walking stick still clutched in her other hand. It was going to be a very long night. The kettle whistled, and Eleanor jumped despite expecting it. She poured the boiling water over tea bags in 2 chipped mugs, her movements mechanical. Her mind kept replaying the moment she'd opened the door, questioning it, regretting it, justifying it in an endless loop. When she carried the mugs back to the living room, Michael was still in the chair where she'd left him. Lily had stopped shivering quite so violently, and now lay curled against her father's leg, the blankets cocooned around her. "Here," Eleanor said, setting one mug on the small table beside Michael's chair. She kept the other for herself and retreated to her own chair across the room, the walking stick propped within easy reach. "It's just plain tea, nothing fancy, it's perfect. Thank you." Michael wrapped his hands around the mug, but didn't drink immediately. He glanced down at Lily. Could she have some water, something to drink? Eleanor hesitated, then stood and went back to the kitchen. She filled a glass with water and brought it out, but instead of handing it to Michael, she knelt by Lily herself, keeping Michael in her peripheral vision. "Can you sit up a little, dear?" Eleanor asked, her voice gentler than she'd intended. Lily's eyes fluttered open. They were blue, Eleanor noticed, bright blue, even dimmed with fever. The girl struggled to push herself up on one elbow, and Eleanor helped support her head. "Small sips," Eleanor instructed, holding the glass to Lily's cracked lips. "That's it, not too fast." Lily drank greedily at first, then slowed at Eleanor's urging. When she'd had enough, she sank back down with a soft sigh. "Thank you," she whispered. Eleanor's throat tightened. She stood quickly and retreated back to her chair, putting distance between herself and the child's trusting eyes. Michael took a sip of his tea and closed his eyes briefly. "This is the best thing I've ever tasted." "It's just Lipton," Eleanor said flatly. "Feels like liquid life right now." He cradled the mug, and Eleanor noticed his hands were red and raw, probably from carrying Lily through the snow. "I don't know how to thank you. When I saw your light through the trees, I thought it was a miracle." Eleanor didn't answer. She sipped her own tea and studied him over the rim of her mug. In the firelight, she could see him better now. He had a kind face, she supposed, worry lines around his eyes, a day's worth of stubble on his jaw. His clothes were good quality but nothing flashy, a fleece pullover, jeans, hiking boots that had seen actual hiking. "You said you were heading to Glenwood Springs?" Eleanor finally asked. Michael nodded. "We were going to visit family there. I should have checked the weather more carefully, but the forecast said the storm wouldn't hit until tomorrow night. I thought we'd beat it." He laughed bitterly. "Guess the storm had other plans." "The weather up here doesn't care about forecasts," Eleanor said. "Changes its mind every 5 minutes. I'm learning that." Michael glanced down at Lily, who seemed to have fallen into a restless sleep. "She's been fighting a cold all week. I probably shouldn't have brought her on this trip at all, but she wanted to go, and I thought the drive would be okay. I'm an idiot. You couldn't have known the storm would come early." "No, but I should have been more careful, should have checked the tires better, should have had chains." He ran a hand through his wet hair. "Should have done a lot of things differently." Eleanor recognized the tone. She'd spent enough nights after Harold died, cataloging all her own should-haves. Should have noticed the signs of his stroke coming. Should have insisted he see the doctor sooner. Should have, should have, should have. "You got her here," Eleanor said quietly. "That's what matters." Michael looked up at her, and she saw genuine gratitude in his eyes. "Because you opened your door, in the middle of a blizzard, to complete strangers. That took courage." Eleanor's hand tightened on her mug. Courage or foolishness, she thought. The jury was still out. A silence fell between them, broken only by the crackling fire and the wind howling outside. Eleanor found herself watching Lily sleep, watching the rise and fall of the girl's chest under the blankets. So small, so vulnerable. "How old is she?" Eleanor heard herself ask. 8. Just turned 8 last month. Michael's face softened when he looked at his daughter. She wanted a birthday party at the roller skating rink, invited her whole class, fell down about 20 times and got right back up every single time. He smiled at the memory, then the smile faded. Her mom would have loved seeing that.
Is her mother not?
Eleanor trailed off, unsure how to ask delicately. Lily's mom died 2 years ago. Cancer. Michael's voice was quiet but steady, like he'd said these words many times before. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. I'm sorry to hear that, thank you. Michael stared into his tea. Sam was the strong one, the organized one. I'm still figuring out how to do this alone. Most days I feel like I'm just barely keeping my head above water. That must be very difficult, Eleanor said softly, and she meant it. She thought of Harold, of how lost she'd been after he died. At least she'd had all those years with him, all those memories. This little girl would barely remember her mother. Michael looked up. You said is her mother not? Past tense, so you understand what it's like to lose someone. Eleanor hesitated. Sharing personal information felt dangerous, like opening another door. But something in Michael's expression, the genuine sorrow mixed with understanding, made her answer. My husband passed 6 years ago, stroke, very sudden. I'm sorry, Michael said, and the sincerity in his voice was unmistakable. So am I. Eleanor pulled her shawl tighter. We were married 43 years. That's a beautiful thing. 43 years together. Michael managed a small smile. Sam and I only had 10. I thought we'd have so many more. Another silence. Eleanor watched as Michael carefully took off his wet socks and set them near the fire to dry. He moved slowly, telegraphing every action, clearly aware that she was still wary. When he settled back in the chair, he kept his hands visible on the armrests. Can I ask your name? He ventured. I'd like to know who to thank. Eleanor debated not answering, but that seemed unnecessarily rude. She'd already let them in after all. Eleanor Price. Thank you, Mrs. Price. Truly. I know this wasn't easy for you. Eleanor didn't respond to that. Instead she asked, what do you do? For work I mean, when you're not driving through blizzards. I work in technology, software development mostly. Michael's answer was vague but not evasive. It keeps me busy. Too busy sometimes, which is why this trip was important. Lily needs more than just a dad who works all the time. Eleanor nodded slowly. She could respect a man who recognized his shortcomings and tried to do better. As if to emphasize her point, a particularly strong gust of wind slammed against the cabin, making the walls shudder. Lily stirred and whimpered in her sleep. Michael immediately knelt beside her, checking her forehead with the back of his hand. She's burning up. Eleanor stood and moved closer despite herself. From this distance she could see the flush of fever on Lily's cheeks, could hear the congestion in her breathing. Do you have any medicine? Michael asked, looking up at Eleanor with desperate hope. Children's Tylenol, anything. Eleanor thought of her medicine cabinet. Aspirin for her arthritis. Blood pressure medication. Nothing for children. No, nothing that would be safe for her age. Michael's face fell. He looked back down at his daughter, stroking her hair gently.
Okay.
Okay, we'll manage. We've gotten through worse. Eleanor watched them for a long moment, then made a decision. Wait here. She disappeared into the kitchen, and returned a few minutes later, with a bowl of cool water and a clean cloth. She set them down beside Michael without explanation. My mother used to do this when I had fevers as a girl, Eleanor said, her voice a bit less gruff than before. Won't cure anything, but it helps keep the fever from getting too high. Wipe her face, her neck, her wrists. Not too cold or you'll make her shiver more. Michael's eyes glistened. Thank you. Eleanor retreated back to her chair, and watched as Michael dampened the cloth, and gently pressed it to Lily's forehead. The girl sighed softly, but didn't wake. Michael worked quietly, methodically, wetting the cloth again and again, tending to his daughter with infinite patience. Despite herself, despite her fear, and her caution, Eleanor felt the ice around her heart begin to crack just a little. This wasn't the man from 3 years ago. This was a father desperately trying to save his sick child. Whatever else he might be, that truth was written in every careful touch, every worried glance, every gentle word. You're a good father, Eleanor found herself saying. Michael looked up, surprised. I try. Most days I feel like I'm failing. You got her through a blizzard, carried her however many miles to find help. That's not failing. Maybe. Michael managed a small smile. Or maybe I'm just stubborn. Stubborn is what keeps us going sometimes. Michael studied her face in the firelight. You sound like you know something about that. Eleanor looked away, uncomfortable with the perceptiveness but not offended. This life up here alone, it requires a certain amount of stubbornness. How long have you been up here by yourself? Eleanor was quiet for a moment, then decided there was no harm in answering. Since my husband died, 6 years now. We used to come up here together on weekends, holidays. After he passed, I just stayed. Family nearby. No family. Never had children. Eleanor's voice was matter-of-fact, hiding the old pain. Harold and I, we wanted them, but it just didn't happen for us. I'm sorry, it's just how things turned out. Eleanor adjusted her shawl. We had a good life together anyway, that was enough. They sat in companionable silence for a while longer. Michael continued to tend to Lily, and Eleanor found herself relaxing incrementally. The walking stick, while still within reach, no longer felt quite so necessary. Storm's getting worse, Eleanor observed, listening to the wind. We should try to rest. Morning will be here before we know it. You're right. Michael settled back in his chair, but kept one hand on Lily, maintaining contact with his daughter. Mrs. Price, I know you don't know us, and I know you're being cautious. That's smart, but I promise you, we're not going to cause you any trouble. First light, if the storm's passed, we'll be out of your way. Eleanor didn't respond immediately. She pulled her shawl tighter and stared into the fire. Finally she said, "We'll see what the morning brings." It wasn't acceptance, but it wasn't rejection either. It was the best she could offer. As the hours ticked by, and the fire burned low, Eleanor found her eyes growing heavy, despite her determination to stay alert. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was Michael, still awake, still watching over Lily, with a father's eternal vigilance. And for reasons she couldn't quite explain, that image gave her comfort. Eleanor woke with a start, her neck stiff from sleeping in the chair. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the room in a dim red glow. For a moment she couldn't remember why she was in the living room instead of her bed, why her hand was wrapped around a walking stick like a weapon. Then she heard the cough. It all came rushing back. The storm, the knock at the door, the strangers now sleeping in her home. Eleanor's heart raced as she looked across the room. Michael was still in the chair, where she'd last seen him, but his head had finally drooped forward in exhausted sleep. Lily lay curled at his feet, the blankets rising and falling with her labored breathing. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Eleanor could hear the wind shrieking like something alive and angry, could hear the weight of snow building on the roof. Her small clock on the mantel read 3:47 in the morning. She stood slowly, her joints protesting the movement. The arthritis was particularly bad tonight, or rather this morning. Her fingers felt like they'd been frozen solid, the joints swollen and painful. She flexed them carefully, biting back a wince. The fire needed tending. Eleanor picked up the poker with her better hand and stirred the embers, then added 2 more logs from the stack beside the hearth. The wood caught quickly, and flames began to climb. Lily coughed again, a deep wet sound that made Eleanor frown. The girl rolled over, pushing the blankets off, mumbling something in her fevered sleep. Eleanor hesitated, then knelt beside the child. She pressed the back of her hand to Lily's forehead the way her own mother had done decades ago. Hot, far too hot. "Come on now," Eleanor murmured, more to herself than the sleeping girl. "You're burning up, little one." She retrieved the bowl Michael had been using and refilled it with cool water from the kitchen. As she dampened the cloth and pressed it to Lily's flushed face, the girl's eyes fluttered open. "Mama?" Lily whispered, her voice small and confused. Eleanor's throat tightened. "No, sweetheart, your daddy's right here though, he's just sleeping." Lily's unfocused eyes found her father's form in the chair. "Where are we? You're safe. That's all that matters right now." "I don't feel good." "I know." Eleanor wrung out the cloth and gently wiped Lily's neck and wrists. "This will help a little bit." Lily's hand suddenly reached out and grasped Eleanor's wrist. Her grip was weak but desperate. "Don't leave." Something in Eleanor's chest twisted painfully. She thought of all the nights she'd been the one asking that question into the darkness. All the times she'd wished someone, anyone, was there to sit with her through the long lonely hours. "I'm right here," Eleanor found herself saying. "You rest now." Lily's eyes drifted closed again, but her hand remained wrapped around Eleanor's wrist. The old woman stayed kneeling there on the hard floor, her knees aching, her back protesting, but unwilling to pull away from that small trusting grip. After a while, she heard movement. Michael stirred in the chair, his eyes opening slowly, taking a moment to remember where he was. When he saw Eleanor kneeling beside Lily, he sat up quickly. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "I didn't mean to fall asleep. I should have been watching her." "You were exhausted," Eleanor said. "No sense apologizing for being human." Michael rubbed his face with both hands. "How is she?" "Fever's still high, but she's resting." Eleanor carefully extricated her wrist from Lily's grasp and stood, her knees popping audibly. "How long has she been sick?" "Started with a runny nose about 5 days ago. By day 3 it was in her chest. I took her to the doctor, got antibiotics, thought we were managing it." Michael looked down at his daughter with anguish written on his face. "The doctor said it was okay to travel as long as she kept taking her medicine. But I think the cold, the stress of the drive, the storm, it all made it worse." Eleanor lowered herself back into her chair. "Kids get sick, it happens. Not this sick, not on my watch." Michael's hands clenched into fists. "I keep second-guessing everything. Should we have stayed home? Should I have pulled over sooner? Should I have?" "You should stop torturing yourself," Eleanor said quietly, but firmly. "You're doing the best you can in a difficult situation. That's all anyone can do." Michael stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right, I'm sorry." They sat in silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind howl. Eleanor found herself studying Michael's face in the flickering light, the exhaustion etched into every line. The weight of responsibility he carried alone. "It's hard, isn't it?" she finally said, "doing it all alone." Michael looked at her with understanding in his eyes.
Yes.
"It is. I thought I knew loneliness when Harold first died," Eleanor continued, surprising herself with her candor. "But at least I'd had all those years with him."
At least I had the memories.
"You're trying to raise a child and keep your wife's memory alive and deal with your own grief all at the same time. Some days I don't know if I'm doing any of it right." Michael's voice was raw with honesty. "I look at Lily and I see Sam in her smile, in the way she tilts her head when she's thinking. And it's beautiful and it's torture all at once." Eleanor nodded. She understood that particular pain. "The first year after Harold died I couldn't look at his things. His chair, his coffee mug, his coat still hanging by the door. They were everywhere, reminding me of what I'd lost." "What did you do?" "Eventually I packed some things away. Not everything. I kept his favorite chair, his books, but I put away the things that hurt too much to see every day." Eleanor paused. "Everyone grieves differently. There's no right way to do it." "Did it get easier?" "In some ways. In others, no."
Eleanor met his eyes honestly.
"The pain doesn't disappear. It just becomes part of you. You learn to carry it." Michael absorbed this silently. Then he said, "Thank you for talking to me about this. Most people don't know what to say, so they just avoid the topic entirely." "People are uncomfortable with grief," Eleanor said. "They think if they don't mention it you won't think about it. As if you could ever stop thinking about it." "Exactly." Michael managed a small smile.
You understand.
They talked through the long hours of the night, sharing stories of the people they'd lost, the lives they'd built and had to rebuild. Eleanor found herself telling Michael about Harold, about their courtship, their marriage, the quiet joy of their years together. Michael spoke of Sam, of her fierce love for Lily, her strength during the illness, her grace even at the end. "She made me promise something before she died," Michael said as dawn began to lighten the sky. "She made me promise I wouldn't let grief turn me into a ghost, that I'd keep living, keep trying, keep being present for Lily." "That's a hard promise to keep." "It is, but I'm trying." He looked at Eleanor with sudden intensity. "Which is why I'm grateful for tonight. Not just because you saved us, but because you reminded me that there are still good people in the world. People who choose kindness even when it's risky." Eleanor shifted uncomfortably. "I just opened a door." "You opened a door when you were terrified, when every instinct told you not to. That's courage, Mrs. Price." Eleanor didn't know how to respond to that, so she stood and moved to the window. The storm had finally begun to weaken. The snow was falling less heavily now, and the wind had died down to occasional gusts. "Storm's breaking," she observed. "Should be clear by morning." Michael joined her at the window, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Thank you again, for everything." "You've said that enough times," Eleanor said, but there was no sharpness in her tone. "I'll probably say it a few more times before we leave," Michael admitted with a slight smile. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the world outside transform from chaos to calm. And Eleanor realized with surprise that she wasn't counting the hours until they left. She was simply here, in this moment, with these unexpected guests who had somehow become something more than strangers. Lily stirred behind them, and Michael immediately went to her side. Eleanor watched him check her temperature, adjust her blankets, whisper soft reassurances. Watched the tenderness and love in every gesture. Whatever else happened, whatever came next, Eleanor knew one thing for certain: opening that door had been the right choice. Even if her heart was still learning to believe it. The storm finally broke around 8 in the morning. The wind died to occasional gusts, and the snow stopped falling, though what had already fallen lay in deep drifts as far as the eye could see. Eleanor stood at her kitchen window, looking out at the transformed landscape. Everything was buried under what had to be 3 feet of snow at least. The road, the path to town, even her woodshed was nearly covered. The world had turned into a blank white canvas, beautiful and treacherous. Behind her she could hear Michael talking softly to Lily in the living room. The girl's fever had broken sometime around dawn, and while she was still weak and congested, she was clearly on the mend. Eleanor put the kettle on for more tea, and began pulling out ingredients for breakfast. Eggs, a bit of bacon she'd been saving, some bread that was getting stale but would do for toast. Her hands moved automatically through the familiar motions, though the arthritis made every task harder than it should be. "Can I help?" She turned to find Michael standing in the kitchen doorway. His hair was still a mess, and he badly needed a shave, but his eyes were clearer after a few hours of sleep. "I can manage," Eleanor said, but her tone was less defensive than it might have been yesterday. "I'm sure you can, but I'd like to help anyway, if you'll let me." When Eleanor hesitated, he added, "I make a pretty decent breakfast, used to cook for Lily and Sam on weekends. It was kind of our family tradition." Eleanor studied him for a moment, then nodded toward the refrigerator. "Bacon's in there. Don't burn it." "Yes, ma'am." Michael's smile was genuine as he rolled up his sleeves. They worked in companionable silence for a few minutes. Eleanor cracked eggs into a bowl while Michael set the bacon to sizzling in the pan. The smell filled the small kitchen, warm and comforting. "How's Lily this morning?" Eleanor asked. "Much better." The fever breaking was a huge relief. Michael flipped the bacon carefully. "She asked if we were having breakfast here. I told her that was up to you." Eleanor whisked the eggs more vigorously than necessary. "You can't go anywhere in this snow anyway. Road won't be clear until afternoon at the earliest." "Thank you." They finished cooking and carried the food into the living room. Lily was sitting up now, wrapped in the blankets, looking much more like a normal little girl, and less like a fever victim. "That smells good," she said, her voice still hoarse but stronger. "How are you feeling, sweetheart?" Eleanor asked, setting a plate in front of her. "Better, still tired though." "That's the sick working its way out," Eleanor said. "Eat what you can." They sat together around the fire, eating breakfast. Lily chattered between bites about the books Eleanor had given her last night, about how much she liked the stories even though the pages were yellow and crinkly. "These books are older than Daddy," Lily observed, studying one of the covers. "They're older than a lot of things," Eleanor said with a hint of amusement. "I got those for my 10th birthday. That was a very long time ago." "What was it like when you were little?" Lily asked, her natural curiosity overcoming her fatigue. Eleanor found herself smiling at the memory. "Well, we didn't have television, for one thing, or computers. When we wanted to have fun, we had to go outside and make up games." "That sounds hard." "It was different," Eleanor allowed. "But we didn't know any other way, so it seemed perfectly normal to us." Michael listened with interest as Eleanor shared a few more memories of her childhood. When breakfast was done, he insisted on cleaning up. While he washed dishes, Eleanor noticed him glancing around the kitchen with what seemed like professional interest. "Mrs. Price," he said carefully as he dried the last plate. "I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but I noticed your kitchen faucet is dripping pretty badly, and that bottom hinge on the front door is loose. Would it be all right if I took a look at them? Just to make sure they're not going to cause bigger problems." Eleanor's first instinct was to refuse, but she caught herself before the words came out. Michael wasn't being intrusive or condescending, he was simply offering to help in the way he knew how. "I suppose that would be all right," she said slowly. "Tools are in the shed, if you can get to it through all that snow." Michael grinned. "I carried Lily through worse last night. I think I can manage." He bundled up in his now dry coat and went outside. Eleanor watched through the window as he waded through the deep snow, sometimes sinking up to his thighs. When he finally reached the shed, he had to dig out the door before he could open it. "Your daddy's very determined," Eleanor observed to Lily, who had come to stand beside her at the window. The girl nodded. "Mama used to say he was like a dog with a bone when he decided to do something. She meant it in a nice way though." Eleanor smiled. "I'm sure she did." Michael came back carrying a toolbox, and immediately set to work. Eleanor tried not to hover, but she found herself drawn to watch his careful, methodical approach. The way he tested the hinge, tightened each screw precisely, then tested it again to make sure it was secure. The way he dismantled the faucet with confident movements, replaced a worn washer, and reassembled everything. "There," he said finally, turning the faucet off and on. "No drip, that should hold." "Thank you," Eleanor said, and meant it. Michael started to pack up the tools, then paused. "Mrs. Price, I don't want to overstep, but I noticed while I was in the shed that your woodpile is getting pretty low. Would you mind if I split some more? The exercise would do me good after sitting all night." Eleanor opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. The truth was, her woodpile was low, and splitting wood with her arthritic hands was becoming nearly impossible. "If you'd like to," she said finally. "I won't stop you." Michael spent the next hour outside, splitting wood and stacking it neatly under the shed's overhang where it would stay dry. Eleanor watched him work from the window, marveling at his steady rhythm, the competent way he handled the axe. This was a man who wasn't afraid of physical labor, despite working in technology. Lily settled by the fire with her books, occasionally looking up to make sure both adults were still nearby. She seemed content, Eleanor noticed. Not anxious or fearful, just peacefully present in the moment. When Michael finally came back inside, his face was red from the cold and exertion, but he was smiling. "That should last you a good while now." "You didn't have to do all that," Eleanor said. "I wanted to." Michael hung up his coat. "Besides, it felt good to do something physical. I spend too much time behind a computer screen." The rest of the morning passed quietly. They drank tea, talked in fits and starts, and simply existed together in the warm cabin while the world outside remained frozen and still. Around noon, Lily found some paper and crayons in her backpack. She settled by the fire and began to draw with intense concentration, her tongue poking out slightly as she worked. Eleanor found herself drifting over to watch. "What are you making?" "A picture," Lily said, not looking up. "For you, for me." "Uh-huh, it's a surprise though, you can't see until I'm done." Eleanor returned to her chair, secretly touched by the gesture. Michael dozed in his chair, finally catching up on the sleep he'd missed. The cabin was peaceful, filled with the crackling of the fire and the soft scratch of Lily's crayons on paper. When Lily finished about an hour later, she held up the paper proudly. "Done, you can look now, Grandma." Eleanor's breath caught at the casual use of grandma, but she said nothing about it. Instead she leaned forward to study the drawing. It was simple in the way that children's art is simple, but the meaning was unmistakably clear. A small cabin sat in a field of white snow, orange and yellow light spilled from its windows and door. And in that doorway stood a figure with gray hair, arms outstretched, while two smaller figures approached through the snow, a man carrying a child. At the bottom, in careful shaky letters, Lily had written, "The lady who saved me." Eleanor's throat closed up entirely. She couldn't speak. She stared at the drawing, at the way this child had seen her. Not as a frightened old woman who'd reluctantly opened a door, as a savior. As someone with arms outstretched in welcome. "Do you like it?" Lily asked anxiously. It's Eleanor's voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again. It's beautiful, sweetheart, it's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. Really? Eleanor carefully took the drawing, holding it as if it were made of glass. I'll treasure this always, Lily beamed. Then, without warning or hesitation, she crossed the room and hugged Eleanor. Eleanor froze. She couldn't remember the last time she'd been hugged. Years. It had been years. Lily's small arms wrapped around her middle, and the girl's head tucked perfectly under her chin. Slowly, carefully, Eleanor's arms came up to return the embrace. She held the child gently, feeling the warmth of her, the absolute trust in the way Lily relaxed against her. Something inside Eleanor's chest cracked open, something that had been frozen solid for far too long. When Lily pulled back, she was still smiling. You're nice. I'm glad the storm brought us here. I'm glad we met you. Eleanor couldn't find words. She just nodded, blinking back tears. Michael had woken during the exchange. He watched them with an expression Eleanor couldn't quite read, something warm and sad and hopeful all at once. As the afternoon wore on, they heard the distant sound of a snowplow working its way up the mountain road. Civilization was returning. Soon Michael would be able to call for help, and they would leave. The thought filled Eleanor with an unexpected hollow feeling. Around 4 o'clock, Michael's phone finally got a signal. He made several calls, arranged for his car to be towed, and organized their departure. A friend from Denver would come get them, could be there in a few hours. We'll be out of your way by evening. Michael told Eleanor, I've got a friend coming with a truck, he'll take us home. Eleanor nodded, telling herself she was relieved. Telling herself she'd be glad to have her space back, to return to her quiet solitude. She didn't believe herself at all. Lily looked up from her books with troubled eyes. Do we have to go? Yes, sweetheart, we've stayed long enough. But I like it here. Lily's lower lip trembled slightly. I like Grandma, Eleanor. Eleanor felt her heart squeeze. I like you too, sweetheart. Michael pulled a small notebook from his pocket and wrote something down, then tore out the page. Mrs. Price, this is my phone number. If you ever need anything, and I mean anything at all, please call me. Or if you just want to talk. Anytime. Eleanor took the paper carefully. Just a phone number, nothing more, no title, no address, just 7 digits and his name, Michael. Thank you, she said quietly. For everything you did around here today. You didn't have to. I wanted to. Michael held her gaze. You saved our lives last night. Let me have the small satisfaction of knowing your door won't fall off its hinges and you'll have enough firewood. Eleanor almost smiled. When you put it that way. When Michael's friend arrived around 6:30, Eleanor helped them gather their few belongings. Lily moved slowly, reluctant, holding on to Eleanor's hand as they walked to the door. Can we come visit you? Lily asked suddenly. Eleanor looked at Michael, uncertain. He nodded encouragingly. I'd like that, Eleanor found herself saying. I'd like that very much. Lily threw her arms around Eleanor one more time. I'll draw you more pictures, I'll hang them right next to this one. Eleanor promised, holding up the drawing of the cabin. Michael shook Eleanor's hand, formally, but his eyes were warm. Thank you, Mrs. Price, for your courage, your kindness, and your hospitality. We won't forget it. Neither will I, Eleanor said softly. She stood in the doorway as they climbed into the truck, waving as it pulled away, watching until the taillights disappeared around the bend. Then she closed the door, the one with the newly fixed hinge, and locked it carefully. The cabin felt enormous and empty, too quiet. Eleanor looked at the chairs by the fire where Michael and Lily had sat, at the bowl and cloth still beside the hearth. At the drawing in her hand, she walked to her mantelpiece and propped the drawing against a framed photo of Harold, 2 pieces of her life, side by side. The past and something new she couldn't quite name yet. Outside, darkness fell over Silver Pine Ridge. Inside, Eleanor built up the fire with the wood Michael had split and sat in her chair. She looked at the drawing for a long time, at the figure with outstretched arms. The lady who saved me, but Eleanor wondered if maybe, just maybe, they had saved her too. 4 days passed. Eleanor tried to return to her normal routine, but nothing felt quite normal anymore. The cabin seemed too quiet. Her meals for one felt sparse and sad. She kept finding little reminders of Michael and Lily's presence, a forgotten hair ribbon under the couch, an indentation in the pillow where Lily's head had rested. She told herself she was being foolish. They'd been strangers who'd needed shelter, she'd provided it. End of story. But she couldn't stop looking at Lily's drawing on the mantel, couldn't stop thinking about Michael's kindness, about Lily's easy laughter, about how it had felt to matter to someone again. On the 5th day, Eleanor heard a vehicle coming up the road. She tensed automatically, old fears rising. But when she looked out the window, she saw a familiar truck parking in front of her cabin. Michael climbed out, carrying several grocery bags. Lily hopped down after him, already smiling. Eleanor opened the door before they could knock, her heart suddenly light in a way she'd almost forgotten. "Mrs. Price," Michael said, his smile warm. "I hope you don't mind us dropping by, we wanted to see how you were doing. And to say thank you properly," Lily added, bouncing on her toes. "With presents." Eleanor stepped back to let them in, unable to suppress her own smile. "You didn't have to do that. We wanted to," Michael said, setting the bags on her kitchen counter. "That night, with everything happening so fast, we didn't get a chance to really express our gratitude, so here we are." The bags contained fresh groceries, fruits, vegetables, good coffee, fresh bread, and a few other items. Eleanor noticed a new set of dish towels, some hand cream that Michael said was supposed to be good for arthritis, and a box of expensive tea. "This is too much," Eleanor protested. "It's not nearly enough," Michael countered gently. "Mrs. Price, you saved our lives, a few groceries hardly covers that debt." "There's no debt," Eleanor said firmly. "You needed help, I gave it. That's all." Lily tugged on Eleanor's sleeve. "I brought you something too. It's not groceries though." She pulled a small wrapped package from her coat pocket. Eleanor unwrapped it carefully to find a hand-painted picture frame, clearly made by a child, with Grandma Eleanor written in glitter glue across the top. "For your drawing," Lily explained, "so it doesn't get wrinkled." Eleanor's eyes stung with tears. "Thank you, sweetheart, it's perfect." They spent the next hour together, Michael and Eleanor talking while Lily played with some toys she'd brought. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, as if they'd known each other for years instead of days. "How have you been?" Michael asked. "Really?" Eleanor considered lying, saying everything was fine, but something about Michael's genuine concern made her tell the truth. "Lonely," she admitted quietly. "I didn't realize how lonely until you both left and the quiet came back." Michael nodded slowly. "I understand that feeling. Our apartment felt empty after spending time here. Lily asked about you every day." "Did she really?" "She did. Kept asking when we could come back, if you were okay, if you had enough firewood." He smiled. "I think you made quite an impression on her." "She made an impression on me too," Eleanor confessed. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Michael took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for something. "Mrs. Price, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you from the beginning." He paused, his hands clasping and unclasping nervously. "I wasn't completely honest about my life, about who I am." Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "When you asked what I do for work, I told you I work in technology." "That's true, but it's not the whole truth." Michael looked down at his hands. "The reason I was vague, the reason I didn't tell you everything, is complicated. And it starts a long time ago when I was very young." Eleanor stayed quiet, sensing he needed to tell this his own way. "I grew up in foster care," Michael said quietly. "My parents died when I was 4, car accident. I don't remember much about them, just flashes really. My mom's perfume, my dad's laugh. After they died, I went into the system because there was no other family. No grandparents, no aunts or uncles who could take me." Eleanor's expression softened with understanding and sympathy. "I bounced around between homes for years," Michael continued, his voice steady but distant, as if reciting facts rather than living memories. "Some were okay, some weren't. None of them were permanent. I learned pretty quickly not to get attached, not to expect anyone to really see me as theirs. I was always temporary. Always just passing through. That must have been very difficult, Eleanor said gently. It was, but it also taught me things. Taught me to be self-reliant, taught me that family isn't something you can count on having. He looked up at her. When I met Sam in college, she was the first person who ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere. Like I mattered to someone. Her family kind of adopted me. Her parents treated me like a son. It was the first time since I was 4 years old that I felt like I had a home. Eleanor's throat tightened, understanding now the depth of his loss when Sam died. When Sam got sick, when she died, I lost everything all over again. Not just my wife, but the only real family I'd had since I was a little boy. Her parents were devastated, pulled away because it hurt too much to see me and Lily. I understood, but it meant we were alone again. Me and Lily, trying to figure out how to be a family of two. I'm so sorry, Eleanor whispered. Michael smiled sadly. The thing is, going through foster care, never having stability, it made me determined to build something solid for myself. I threw myself into my work, built a company from nothing. I succeeded beyond anything I could have imagined. He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, holding it out to her. This is who I became professionally. Eleanor took the card with trembling fingers. She looked down at the embossed lettering. Michael Grant CEO, Grant Tech Solutions. Her eyes stayed fixed on those 3 letters, CEO. The words beneath explained that Grant Tech Solutions was a software and data security company with multiple locations across 6 states. Eleanor's hands began to shake. She read the card again, then looked up at Michael, her expression shifting from surprise to confusion to something like hurt. Her voice came out as a whisper. You're a CEO of a big company. Yes, Michael said quietly. We have about 3,000 employees across the country. The company develops cloud computing infrastructure and cybersecurity software. It's worth a lot. Eleanor stared at him, her mind reeling. A CEO, not just someone who worked in technology, but someone who ran a major company. Someone with wealth and power and resources beyond anything she could imagine. Why didn't you tell me? The words came out sharper than she intended, but she couldn't help it. Michael leaned forward, his expression earnest and pained. Because I've learned the hard way what happens when people know about the money. Growing up with nothing, being nobody's child, and then suddenly having wealth, it changes how people see you. Some people treat you differently, like you're not quite real anymore. Others see dollar signs and start calculating. I wanted you to see me as just a person, just a father trying to save his daughter. But you lied to me, Eleanor said, her voice rising slightly. You let me think. I never lied, I just didn't tell you everything. Michael's voice was steady but pleading. Eleanor, that night in the storm, we were just 2 people who needed help. You didn't help us because we were rich or important. You helped because it was the right thing to do. That meant everything to me. It meant you saw us as human beings, not as a CEO and his daughter.
Eleanor's breathing was becoming labored, her chest felt tight. The room seemed to spin slightly. Was this some kind of test? Did you want to see how the poor old woman would treat the rich man when she didn't know? Were you checking to see if I was worthy? What? No. Michael's expression was horrified. He moved closer, reaching out but not quite touching her. Eleanor, please, that's not what this was at all. Everything that happened was real. We were genuinely lost. Lily was genuinely sick. My gratitude is genuine. The only thing I held back was information about my company, and I did that because... But Eleanor wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was spinning with memories, with implications, with the feeling of being tested and evaluated without her knowledge. The tightness in her chest intensified, spreading down her left arm in a crushing wave of pain. Her vision started to narrow at the edges, the room telescoping around her. Mrs. Price. Michael's voice seemed to come from far away. Eleanor, are you okay? She tried to respond, tried to tell him something was wrong, but the pain was overwhelming. Her legs buckled, and she felt herself falling, everything going sideways. Michael caught her before she hit the floor, lowering her gently.
Lily, call 911, right now. Daddy, what's wrong with Grandma? Lily's voice was high with panic, breaking with fear. Just call, tell them we need an ambulance, tell them it's a heart attack. Michael's voice was commanding but controlled as he turned back to Eleanor. He cradled her head carefully, his hands checking her pulse. Stay with me, Eleanor. Just breathe, nice and slow, can you hear me? Eleanor tried to nod, but even that small movement sent fresh agony through her chest. She could see Lily crying, her small hands shaking as she spoke into Michael's phone, could hear Michael giving calm, clear instructions, could feel his hands supporting her, keeping her from falling further. The pain was crushing her, literally crushing her. She couldn't breathe properly, couldn't think past the overwhelming pressure in her chest. It felt like someone had placed an enormous weight on her ribs and was slowly, steadily pressing down. Is this it? She thought dimly. Is this how I die? Like Harold did. The ambulance is coming, Michael was saying, his voice steady despite the fear she could see in his eyes. It's going to be about 15 minutes. Eleanor, I need you to stay calm, you're having a heart attack. But help is coming. Do you have aspirin? Eleanor tried to point toward the bathroom, but her arm felt impossibly heavy, like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She couldn't make it move the way she wanted. I'll find it. Lily disappeared down the hall, her footsteps quick and scared. She returned moments later with the bottle, tears streaming down her face. Is this it, Daddy? Is this right? Good girl, Lily. You're doing great. Michael's hands were steady as he opened the bottle and crushed an aspirin tablet. He helped Eleanor get it under her tongue, his touch gentle but efficient. This will help. Just hold on. Please hold on. We need you. Lily knelt beside Eleanor, her small hands reaching out but hesitating, as if afraid to hurt her. Please don't die, Grandma Eleanor. Please, we just found you. We love you so much. Please don't leave us. Eleanor wanted to comfort the girl, wanted to wipe away those tears, but she couldn't speak, couldn't move. The pain was too much. Everything was too much. Her vision kept graying out at the edges, and she had to fight to stay conscious, to keep breathing, to not slip away into the darkness that beckoned. The 15 minutes felt like hours. Michael stayed beside her the entire time, monitoring her pulse, checking her breathing, talking to her in a calm, steady voice that belied the terror in his eyes. He kept Lily calm too, giving her small tasks: bring a pillow, get a blanket, stay close but give Grandma room to breathe. You're going to be okay, Michael kept saying, like a mantra, like if he said it enough times it would become true. Help is almost here, just a few more minutes. Stay with us, Eleanor. Please stay with us. When the ambulance finally arrived, the paramedics moved with practiced efficiency. Eleanor felt herself being lifted onto a stretcher, felt the bite of an IV needle in her arm, heard the beeping of monitors that seemed impossibly loud. Everything was happening so fast, too fast. Voices talking over her, hands moving efficiently, bright lights shining in her eyes. I'm coming with you, Michael announced as they wheeled her toward the ambulance. His voice was firm, brooking no argument. Sir, only family members are allowed. I'm her son, Michael said firmly, without hesitation, meeting the paramedic's eyes directly, and I'm not leaving her. She has no one else. Through her haze of pain, Eleanor wanted to protest, wanted to tell them the truth, but no words would come, and part of her, a part she wouldn't examine too closely right now, was profoundly grateful he'd lied. Grateful she wouldn't be alone, grateful that someone cared enough to fight to stay with her. The last thing she saw before the ambulance doors closed was Lily's tear-stained face, her small hand pressed against the window, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer or a plea. Then they were moving, sirens wailing, and the motion combined with the pain made everything blur. Eleanor surrendered to the darkness, letting it pull her under, trusting that Michael was there, that she wasn't alone. She woke in a hospital room some time later. The steady beep of monitors provided a rhythmic soundtrack to her confused thoughts. Everything was white and sterile and unfamiliar. For a moment panic seized her. Where was she? What had happened? Then memory returned in fragments. The business card, the revelation about Michael's wealth and childhood, the crushing pain in her chest, the fear in Lily's eyes. You're awake. Eleanor turned her head carefully. Michael sat in a chair beside her bed, looking exhausted but intensely relieved. His hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled, dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. How long? Eleanor's voice came out as a croak, her throat dry and painful. About 6 hours. You had a mild heart attack. The doctors say you'll recover fully with rest and medication, but you need to avoid stress. Michael leaned forward, his expression anguished. Eleanor, I'm so sorry, this is my fault. I never should have kept the truth from you. I never meant to cause you any harm. Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling tears leak from the corners. I thought, when I saw that card, I thought it was all fake. That you'd been testing me somehow, playing some kind of game. No. Michael's voice was thick with emotion. God, no. Eleanor, everything was real. My fear for Lily, my gratitude to you, the connection we felt, all of it was real. The only thing I withheld was information about my company and my wealth, and I can see now that was wrong. I hurt you by not being completely honest. You said you grew up with nothing, Eleanor said quietly, opening her eyes to look at him. That you were nobody's child. Yes, and maybe that's why this whole thing is such a mess. Michael ran his hand through his hair. I spent my childhood being overlooked, being temporary, never quite mattering to anyone. Then I built this company, made all this money, and suddenly everyone wanted to know me. But they didn't really see me. They saw the CEO, the money, what I could do for them. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. When I knocked on your door that night, when you opened it despite being terrified, I saw something rare. Someone who helped because it was right, not because of what they could get. And I wanted to keep that. I wanted to be seen as just Michael. Just a father trying to save his daughter. Eleanor absorbed this, understanding the fear behind his omission even as it had hurt her. But I wasn't just anyone, Michael. After that night, after you came back, we became something more. And you still didn't tell me. You're right, I should have told you before now. I was being a coward. Michael reached out hesitantly and took her hand gently. Growing up in foster care, I learned not to trust easily, not to show people everything about myself, because it could be used against me. Even now, even as an adult who should know better, I still do it. I still hold back. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. But you deserved the truth. You deserved honesty, and I'm sorry I didn't give you that. Eleanor looked at their joined hands, feeling the warmth of his grip. She thought about his story, about the little boy bouncing between foster homes, never belonging anywhere, about building a life from nothing, creating success but losing the only real family he'd ever known when Sam died. About being alone again with Lily, trying to be enough for his daughter when he'd never had an example of what family should look like. I understand why you did it, she said quietly, but it still hurt, made me feel like you didn't trust me. I know, and that's on me. Michael squeezed her hand gently. Eleanor, you saved us that night, not just from the storm, but from being alone. For the first time since Sam died, Lily and I felt like we might belong somewhere, with someone, and I was terrified of losing that. Terrified that if you knew about the money, you'd see me differently. How did you think I'd see you? I don't know. As someone to be intimidated by, maybe, or someone to be used, or just not as Michael anymore. He looked away, his jaw tight. Every relationship I've had as an adult, except with Sam, has been colored by the company. People want things from me, investment advice, business connections, money for their projects. I'm always evaluating whether someone likes me, or likes what I can do for them. Is that what you thought I'd do? Eleanor asked. No, not really, but old habits die hard. Michael looked back at her, his expression raw and honest. I should have trusted you. I should have known that the woman who opened her door despite being terrified, who cared for strangers with such kindness, wouldn't suddenly become someone else because of a job title. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. She thought about her own fears, her own walls, about how she'd almost let those fears keep her from helping Michael and Lily in the first place, about how hard it was to trust after being hurt. We're quite a pair, aren't we? She finally said. Both of us so scared of being hurt that we can't quite believe it when something good happens. Michael managed a small sad smile. Yeah, I guess we are. I'm still hurt that you didn't tell me, Eleanor said honestly, but I think I understand why. And I believe you when you say everything else was real. It was, it is. Michael's voice was fervent. Eleanor, you and Lily are the most important people in my life right now. The thought of losing you, of being responsible for this, his voice broke. When you collapsed, I've never been so scared, not since Sam died, not since I was 4 years old and my world fell apart the first time. Eleanor saw the genuine fear in his eyes, the love beneath the guilt. She thought about Lily's tears, about Michael staying by her side, about how he'd claimed to be her son so he could ride in the ambulance with her. "Where is Lily?" she asked. "With my friend in the waiting room. She wanted to stay, but they wouldn't let her. She's made you about 20 get-well cards." Michael smiled slightly. "She's been so worried about you. Keeps asking if you're going to be okay, if you still love us." "Of course I still love you both," Eleanor said, feeling tears slip down her cheeks. "How could I not?" "Then you'll give me another chance?" Michael asked, hope and fear mingled in his expression. "Let me prove that my feelings are real, that this isn't about money or obligation or anything else. Just about family." Eleanor looked at him for a long moment. She saw the orphaned boy he'd been, the man he'd become, the father he was trying to be. She saw his flaws and his fears, and his genuine care, and she made a choice. "Yes," she said softly, "one more chance, but Michael, no more secrets. If we're going to be family, we have to trust each other. All the way, no more secrets." Michael promised fervently, "I swear. Everything from here on out is honest and open. Even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." He held her gaze steadily. "You taught me something, Eleanor. You taught me that being vulnerable, being honest, even when it's terrifying, that's what real connection requires. I'm going to try to be better at that." Eleanor nodded slowly. "And I'll try to trust more easily, to not jump to the worst conclusion. Deal?" They sat in silence for a while, hands still joined, both of them exhausted but relieved. The crisis had passed, but they both knew this was a turning point. They could retreat to their respective corners, protecting themselves, or they could move forward together, risking hurt but finding family. "Can I see Lily?" Eleanor asked after a while. "I'll get her." Michael stood but paused at the door. "Eleanor, thank you, for giving me another chance. For understanding, for still being here." "Thank you for staying," Eleanor replied. "For not running away when things got hard, for caring enough to fight for this." Michael smiled, genuine warmth breaking through the exhaustion on his face. "Always. I promise you that. Always." As he left to get Lily, Eleanor lay back against her pillows and closed her eyes. Her chest still ached, but not just from the heart attack. It ached from the stretching, the growing, the opening up of something that had been closed for so long. Trust was hard, especially when you'd been hurt before. But maybe, just maybe, it was worth the risk. Maybe the door she'd opened that stormy night was still opening, revealing not just Michael and Lily, but a whole new way of living. A way that included love and risk, and the messy, complicated beauty of becoming family. The hospital released Eleanor after 5 days with strict instructions to rest, avoid stress, and follow up with a cardiologist. The doctor also gave her a stern lecture about living alone at her age with a heart condition. "You need someone checking on you regularly," the doctor said, looking over her glasses at Eleanor. "Family, friends, a visiting nurse, someone who can monitor your condition, and get help quickly if needed." "I'll make sure of it," Michael said from his position beside Eleanor's bed. He'd barely left the hospital since she'd been admitted. "See that you do." The doctor turned to Eleanor. "Mrs. Price, a second event could be more serious. You need to take this seriously." Eleanor nodded meekly. She'd been shaken by how quickly her body had betrayed her, how close she'd come to Harold's fate. The fear of dying alone in her cabin now felt very real, and very possible. Michael drove her home in his truck, with Lily chattering nervously in the back seat, filling the silence with stories about everything she'd done while Eleanor was in the hospital. It was clear the girl was anxious, covering her worry with words. When they pulled up to the cabin, Eleanor felt a wave of relief and trepidation. Home, but also the place where she'd collapsed, where she'd felt her mortality so acutely. "Let me help you inside," Michael said, coming around to open her door. "I can walk," Eleanor protested, but her voice lacked conviction.
I know you can, but let me help anyway. Michael supported her as they walked up the path, Lily darting ahead to open the door. Inside the cabin was exactly as she'd left it, but somehow it felt different. Smaller, lonelier. I picked up your prescriptions, Michael said, setting several pharmacy bags on the kitchen counter. The pharmacist explained when you should take each one. I wrote it down too just in case. Eleanor looked at the neat list he'd made, complete with times and dosages. You didn't have to do all this. Yes, I did. Michael's voice was gentle but firm. Eleanor, I meant what I said in the hospital. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to help you through this recovery whether you like it or not. I don't want to be a burden, Eleanor said quietly. Lily looked up from where she'd been arranging the get-well cards she'd made along the mantelpiece. You're not a burden, Grandma, Eleanor. Your family. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes at the casual way Lily said it, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. True to his word, from that day forward, Michael and Lily became fixtures in Eleanor's life. They visited 3 times that first week, then settled into a routine of coming every other day. Michael would bring groceries, help with household chores, make sure Eleanor was taking her medications correctly. Lily would sit with Eleanor, reading to her, showing her schoolwork, just keeping her company. I brought my homework again, Lily announced one afternoon about 2 weeks after Eleanor's hospital release. We're learning fractions and I hate them. Will you help me? Eleanor, who hadn't thought about fractions in decades, found herself peering at the worksheet. Well, now let's see what we've got here. While they worked at the kitchen table, Michael busied himself around the cabin. Eleanor had stopped protesting his help. She'd noticed that he found things that needed fixing almost by instinct. The loose floorboard in the hallway that she'd learned to step over, the window in her bedroom that had always been drafty, the cabinet door that didn't quite close right. You don't have to keep fixing things, Eleanor said one day, watching him adjust something on her kitchen cabinet. I know I don't have to. Michael glanced at her with a small smile, but it makes me feel useful, and besides, Lily needs to see you living somewhere safe and comfortable. These little things add up. Eleanor couldn't argue with that logic, and truthfully she was grateful. Her arthritis made so many tasks difficult, and having someone to help without judgment felt like a gift. As weeks turned into a month, something shifted between them. Eleanor stopped jumping at unexpected sounds when Michael was in another room. She stopped double-checking that her valuables were where she'd left them. She stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop. Instead, she found herself relaxing into a rhythm she'd thought lost forever. The rhythm of having people in her life who cared. One evening, as they sat around her newly repaired dining table eating soup Eleanor had taught Lily to make, the girl looked up suddenly. Grandma, Eleanor, tell us about when you were young. What was it like? Oh, that's ancient history, Eleanor deflected. Please, Lily's eyes were wide and pleading. I want to know about you, Michael smiled encouragingly. I'd like to hear too. So Eleanor, haltingly at first, began to talk. She told them about growing up on a farm in Nebraska during hard times, about her 6 siblings and the one-room schoolhouse where one teacher taught all grades. She talked about weekly trips to town in the wagon, about helping her mother can vegetables for winter, about the summer her father taught her to drive the tractor. We didn't have much, Eleanor said, her voice soft with memory, but we had each other. I remember my mother always saying that family was the only wealth that truly mattered. That's beautiful, Michael said quietly. Eleanor continued, telling them about meeting Harold at a county fair when she was 19. How he'd won her a stuffed bear at the ring toss and she'd known right then he was special. We were married 6 months later, Eleanor said, smiling at the memory. Everyone said we were rushing into it, but we had 43 years together. I'd say we made the right choice. How did you know he was the one? Lily asked, chin propped in her hands. I just knew. Eleanor shrugged. He made me laugh. He listened when I talked. He never tried to make me into something I wasn't. He just loved me exactly as I was. Mama used to say that about Daddy, Lily said, looking at her father. She said he loved her even when she was grumpy in the morning. Michael laughed, his eyes growing distant. Your mama wasn't a morning person, that's for sure. Tell me about her, Eleanor said gently. Tell me about Sam. Michael's expression grew soft. She was sunshine. That's the best way I can describe her. She found joy in everything. A good cup of coffee, a pretty sunset. Your laughter, Lily. He reached over and ruffled his daughter's hair. She used to say that happiness was a choice you made every day, and she chose it. Even when she got sick, even at the end, she chose to focus on the good things. She sounds like she was a wonderful person, Eleanor said. She was. She really was. Michael's eyes glistened, and she would have liked you. She always appreciated people who spoke their mind and had good hearts. She would have said you two were kindred spirits. They talked late into the evening, sharing stories, laughing at memories, sometimes crying at the sadder ones. Eleanor found herself telling Michael and Lily things she hadn't spoken about in years, about miscarriages and the grief of childlessness, about watching friends die or move away, about the slow erosion of feeling connected to the world. After Harold died, I felt like I died too, Eleanor admitted. Not physically, but everything inside that mattered. I was just going through motions, waiting for it to be over. And now, Michael asked softly. Eleanor looked at him, then at Lily, who was leaning against her side sleepily. Now I feel like maybe there's still something worth staying for. Michael's smile was warm and understanding. Good, because we're very glad you're here. As the weeks continued, Eleanor's health improved, her strength returned gradually, and she found herself able to do more each day. But more than the physical healing, something deeper was mending. The walls she'd built around her heart were crumbling, one brick at a time. She started looking forward to Michael and Lily's visits with an eagerness that surprised her. Started planning little treats for when they came, cookies baked despite her arthritic hands. Lily's favorite soup simmering on the stove, the good tea served in her best cups. One day, about 6 weeks after her heart attack, Michael found her in the kitchen making bread. "Should you be doing that?" he asked, concerned. "All that kneading my hands are better this week," Eleanor said. "The new medicine is helping. Besides, I wanted to make something nice for dinner." "For dinner?" Michael looked confused. "Well, yes, you are staying for dinner, aren't you?" Eleanor looked at him over her shoulder. "I thought the three of us could eat together." "I made a roast." Michael's expression softened into something Eleanor couldn't quite name. "We'd love to stay for dinner." That evening, as they sat around the table sharing the meal Eleanor had prepared, she felt something shift inside her chest. Not the painful tightness of her heart attack, but a different kind of fullness, a warmth that spread through her whole body. This, she thought, looking at Michael's smile and Lily's animated chatter. This is what I've been missing. This is what home is supposed to feel like, not a place, not a building. People, connection, love. Grandma. Eleanor. Lily's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "You're smiling. What are you thinking about?" Eleanor reached over and squeezed the girl's hand. "I'm thinking about how lucky I am. That's all. We're the lucky ones," Michael said quietly, meeting her eyes across the table. "We're the ones who found you." Eleanor shook her head. "I think maybe we found each other," and for the first time in years she truly believed it. Spring came slowly to Silver Pine Ridge, melting the snow in patches and revealing the brown earth underneath. As the world outside came back to life, so did Eleanor. Not just physically recovering from her heart attack, but truly living again. Michael and Lily's visits had become the cornerstone of her week. 3 times a week at first, then 4, and now they came almost every other day. It was never intrusive, never felt like too much. It felt natural, like this was how things were meant to be. One Saturday in April, Lily burst through the door with her usual energy, but this time she was carrying a small potted plant. "Look what we brought," she announced. "It's for your garden. Daddy says we can plant it together." Eleanor looked at the tomato seedling, then at Michael, who was following behind with several more pots and a bag of soil. "I thought we could start a little garden," Michael explained. "Nothing too ambitious, just some tomatoes, maybe some herbs, if you're interested." Eleanor thought about the garden she and Harold used to tend together. How it had become overgrown and wild after he died, how she'd eventually let it go completely. The idea of starting again, of nurturing something back to life, felt both daunting and right. "I think that would be nice," she said softly. They spent the afternoon together in the warming sunshine, preparing the soil, planting the seedlings, laughing when Lily got more dirt on herself than in the pots. Eleanor supervised from a chair Michael had brought outside, giving advice while conserving her energy. "Not too deep," she instructed, as Lily planted a basil seedling, "just deep enough to cover the roots. That's it, perfect." Michael worked beside his daughter, following Eleanor's guidance. Watching them work together, seeing the care they took with each plant, Eleanor felt a fierce protectiveness rise in her chest. These were her people now. Somehow, impossibly, they'd become her family. "What are you thinking about, Grandma?" Lily asked, noticing Eleanor's distant expression. "Just watching you two," Eleanor said. "Thinking about how much has changed since that night in the storm." "Everything changed," Lily said simply. "We found you and you found us, and now we're a family." "Is that what we are?" Eleanor asked, her voice catching slightly. "Of course." Lily looked genuinely confused that Eleanor would question it. "You're my grandma. Daddy says so too." Eleanor looked at Michael, who nodded. "She's right, that's how I think of you, Eleanor. As family, as Lily's grandmother and my—" He paused, searching for the right word. "My mother, if you'll have me." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "I never had children of my own. Harold and we tried, but it just wasn't meant to be. I always wondered what it would be like. And now you know," Michael said gently. "Yes," Eleanor whispered. "Now I know." Lily came over and wrapped her muddy arms around Eleanor, not caring about getting dirt on both of them. Eleanor held her tight, this child who had somehow stolen her heart completely. As spring progressed into early summer, the garden grew and so did their bond. Lily started leaving things at the cabin, a change of clothes, some books, art supplies. Michael kept a spare set of tools in Eleanor's shed. Eleanor found herself cooking for three, as a matter of course, always making sure there was enough for when they came.
One evening in June after dinner, Michael cleared his throat in a way that suggested he had something important to say. "Eleanor, I've been thinking about something for a while now and I want to talk to you about it." Eleanor set down her tea, suddenly nervous. "What is it?" "These past few months have been incredible. For both Lily and me, having you in our lives, being able to spend time here, it's been healing in ways I didn't even know we needed." Michael paused, choosing his words carefully. "But I worry about you being up here alone, especially at night, especially with your heart condition." "Michael, we've talked about this. I know, you're independent and capable, and I respect that. But hear me out." Michael leaned forward earnestly. "What if we made this more official? What if we formalized our relationship as family?" "What do you mean?" Eleanor asked carefully. "I mean, I want to set up some legal protections for you. Power of attorney so I can help with medical decisions if needed. Emergency contacts updated to list me and Lily. I want to make sure that if something happens you're not alone and you're taken care of." Eleanor's first instinct was to refuse to assert her independence, but she caught herself. This wasn't about taking away her autonomy. This was about having backup, having people who would be there when she needed them. And in exchange, Michael continued, "I'd like you to be listed as Lily's guardian if something happens to me. I know that's a lot to ask, given your age and health, but there's no one else I'd trust more. You'd have full financial support, of course." "And Michael," Eleanor interrupted gently, "stop talking about money. You know that's not what matters here." "I know, but I need you to know that you'd never be burdened financially. That's not what this is about." "What is it about?" Eleanor asked, though she thought she knew. "It's about making official what we already feel in our hearts, that we're family, that we take care of each other, that neither of us is alone anymore." Michael's voice was thick with emotion. "You gave me and Lily a home when we were lost. Let me give you the same thing. Not a physical home, but the security of knowing you have people, that you matter to us, that we're in this together." Eleanor looked at Lily, who was nodding eagerly. "Please say yes, Grandma. We love you." Those simple words, spoken with such innocent certainty, broke through Eleanor's last defenses. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes to all of it." Michael stood and came around the table, pulling Eleanor into a hug. Lily joined them, creating a three-person embrace that felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Thank you," Michael whispered. "Thank you for trusting us. Thank you for not giving up on me." Eleanor replied, "Thank you for seeing past the scared old woman to who I used to be, who I can be again." They spent the rest of the evening talking about practicalities but also about dreams. Eleanor told them about places she'd always wanted to see but never had. Lily shared her hopes for the future. Michael talked about wanting to step back from work a bit, to spend more time with the people who mattered. "Life's too short," he said. "Sam taught me that. We keep thinking we have time and then suddenly we don't." "That's true," Eleanor agreed. "I spent 6 years hiding away trying to protect myself from being hurt again. And I was hurt, but I was also half dead. I wasn't living, I was just existing." "And now?" Lily asked. Eleanor smiled at the girl. "Now I'm living, because of you two. You reminded me what it feels like to care about someone, to look forward to tomorrow." As the summer evening faded into twilight, they sat on the porch together, watching fireflies begin their dance in the meadow. Eleanor sat between Michael and Lily, feeling the warmth of their presence, the security of their love. She thought about that night in the storm, about the terror she'd felt opening her door, about how close she'd come to leaving them out in the cold, about how different her life would be now if she'd made that choice. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked quietly. "That door," Eleanor said. "The one I almost didn't open, but you did open it," Michael reminded her. "Yes, I did." Eleanor smiled in the gathering darkness. "Best decision I ever made." "Best decision we ever made," Michael corrected. "To knock on that door, to trust that someone would help us, to come back after the storm passed." "We're all pretty brave," Lily observed. "Daddy was brave to carry me through the snow. You were brave to open the door, Grandma. And I was brave to be sick and not complain too much." They all laughed at that, the sound carrying across the quiet meadow. Eleanor reached out and took their hands, one on each side of her. "My family," she said, testing the words. "Our family," Michael agreed. And sitting there on the porch of her cabin, with the people she loved on either side of her, Eleanor felt something she hadn't felt in years. Complete, whole, home. Not because of the place but because of the people. Not despite her fears but because she'd been brave enough to face them. Not by accident but by choice. The choice to open a door, the choice to trust, the choice to love again. August brought heat and long lazy days. Eleanor's garden flourished under her care and Michael's regular attention. Tomatoes ripened on the vine, basil grew fragrant and full, and Eleanor found herself actually enjoying the physical work, even if she had to take frequent breaks. One Sunday afternoon, after they'd finished picking vegetables together, Michael asked Eleanor to sit with him on the porch while Lily played in the meadow beyond. "There's something important I need to talk to you about," he began, his tone serious. Eleanor felt a flutter of anxiety. "That sounds ominous." "It's not bad, I promise. It's actually good. At least I hope you'll think so." Michael turned to face her fully. "These past months have changed everything for me, Eleanor. Changed how I see the world, how I think about family, what matters in life." "For me too," Eleanor said softly. "I know, I can see it in you, the way you smile more, laugh more, the way you've opened up." Michael took her hand gently. "But I need you to understand something. I don't want our relationship to ever be about obligation, not on your part, and not on mine." "What do you mean?" "I mean I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything because I helped with repairs or medical bills. And I don't want to feel like I'm only here because I'm paying back a debt." Michael's eyes were intense, sincere. "What I'm trying to say is, I care about you because of who you are, Eleanor, not because of what you did for us, though that was remarkable. I care because you're wise and funny and kind, because Lily lights up when she talks about you, because this cabin feels more like home than anywhere else." Eleanor's throat tightened. "I care about you too, both of you, more than I thought possible." "Good, because I want to make you a promise. A real binding promise." Michael squeezed her hand. "I promise that I will be here for you. Not just now but for the long haul. When you're strong and when you're weak, when you're easy to be around and when you're difficult, through whatever comes." "Michael, you can't promise." "Yes, I can. Because that's what family does. They show up. they stay. His voice was firm but gentle. And I want to put some practical measures in place to back up that promise. What kind of measures? I've been working with my lawyer to set up a trust. It's specifically designated to ensure you'll always be taken care of. Your property taxes, maintenance on the cabin, medical expenses, everything. It's irrevocable and it will continue even if something happens to me. Eleanor started to protest, but Michael held up his hand. Before you argue, understand this isn't about pity or charity. It's about peace of mind. My peace of mind and yours. I need to know that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, you'll still be okay. That you won't be alone and struggling. His eyes were bright with unshed tears, and I think you need to know that too. That this isn't temporary. That we mean it when we say you're family. Eleanor wiped at her own eyes. I don't know what to say. Say you'll accept it. Say you'll let me do this one thing to ensure you're protected and cared for. Michael's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Eleanor, you risked everything to save us. Your safety, your peace of mind, maybe even your life, given what happened after. Let me return the favor. Let me make sure you're secure for whatever years you have left. Eleanor thought about refusing, about asserting her independence one more time. But what would that accomplish? She'd spent 6 years being fiercely independent and all it had brought her was isolation and fear. Okay, she said finally. Yes, thank you. Michael's whole body sagged with relief. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me. Being able to do this, to know you'll be taken care of. It helps me sleep at night. But I want you to know something too, Eleanor said firmly. This isn't one-sided. You and Lily have given me more than financial security. You've given me a reason to keep going. You've given me joy and purpose and love. That's worth more than any amount of money. I know, Michael said softly. Believe me, I know. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Lily chase butterflies in the tall grass. The girls' laughter carried on the warm breeze, a sound that never failed to make Eleanor smile. Can I ask you something? Eleanor said after a while. Anything. Why did you really come back that first time? After the storm, I mean. You could have just called, sent a thank you card. Why make the trip all the way back up here? Michael considered the question carefully. Honestly, because I couldn't stop thinking about you. About this woman who'd been so afraid but opened the door anyway. Who'd lost someone she loved but still had the capacity to care for strangers. I wanted to know you were okay. And I wanted Lily to see you again. To thank you properly. He paused, but more than that, I think I knew, even then, that you were going to be important to us. That we'd found something rare. A family, Eleanor said softly. Yes, a family we chose rather than one we were born into, which somehow makes it even more special. Lily came running up to the porch then, flushed and happy. Grandma, Daddy, look what I found. She held out her cupped hands to reveal a small frog. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Eleanor said. But I think that little fellow would like to go back to his home now. Lily carefully released the frog near the porch steps and watched it hop away into the grass. Then she climbed up and settled herself between Eleanor and Michael, one small hand in each of theirs. This is my favorite place, Lily announced. Right here with you too. I wish we could stay here forever. Eleanor felt her eyes sting again. Me too, sweetie. Me too. Michael looked at Eleanor over Lily's head, a question in his eyes. Eleanor knew what he was asking. She took a deep breath. Lily, sweetheart, Eleanor said gently, how would you feel if I told you that you and your daddy are my family now? My real forever family. Lily's face lit up like sunshine. Really? Like for real, real for real? Eleanor confirmed. You're my granddaughter, and your daddy is my son. If that's okay with you. It's more than okay. Lily threw her arms around Eleanor's neck. It's the best thing ever. I always wanted a grandma, and now I have one. Eleanor held the girl tight, feeling Michael's hand warm on her shoulder. Over Lily's head she mouthed thank you to him. He just smiled and mouthed back, thank you. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they sat together on the porch. 3 people who'd found each other by chance but chosen each other by love. Eleanor thought about Harold, about how he would have loved Michael and Lily, about how he would have been proud of her for opening that door, for being brave, for letting love back into her life.
I think Harold would have liked you both, she said aloud. I wish we could have met him, Michael said. From everything you've told us, he sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was. But I think he'd be happy knowing I'm not alone anymore. That's all he ever wanted from me, to be happy and safe and loved. You are all those things, Lily said with the certainty of childhood. Because we love you lots and lots. I love you too, Eleanor said, her voice thick with emotion. Both of you, more than I ever thought I could love anyone again. They sat together until the stars came out, talking and laughing and simply being together. And Eleanor realized that this was what healing looked like. Not forgetting the past or denying the pain, but making room for new love alongside the old. She'd never stop missing Harold, but she could still love Michael and Lily. Her heart was big enough for all of it. As they finally said goodnight, and Eleanor watched their taillights disappear down the mountain road, she stood in her doorway and looked up at the stars. Thank you, she whispered to Harold, to the universe, to whatever force had brought them all together. Thank you for this second chance. Then she closed the door, the one with the sturdy hinge Michael had fixed, and locked it carefully. But this time she locked it not out of fear, but out of contentment, because inside was home, and outside, driving away but always coming back, was her family. Winter returned to Silver Pine Ridge, but this time Eleanor watched it come with anticipation rather than dread. The cabin was weatherproof now, warm and secure. The generator hummed quietly when needed. The woodshed was stocked full, and Eleanor knew that if it ran low, Michael would be there to replenish it. But more importantly, she wasn't alone. Michael and Lily had taken to spending every weekend at the cabin, arriving Friday evening and staying until Sunday night. Michael worked remotely on his laptop while Lily did homework at the kitchen table. Eleanor supervised both of them, offering advice on math problems and business decisions with equal authority. Grandma Eleanor, Lily said one Saturday morning as they worked on making bread together, did you ever think that night in the storm, that we'd become a real family? Eleanor paused in her kneading, considering the question. No, sweetheart, that night I was too scared to think about much beyond keeping you safe, but you weren't too scared to open the door. No, I guess I wasn't, Eleanor smiled. Sometimes being brave just means doing the right thing even when you're terrified. Daddy says you're the bravest person he knows. Eleanor felt her eyes sting. Your daddy is pretty brave himself, raising you all alone, building his company, carrying you through a blizzard. That takes a special kind of strength. I think we're all brave, Lily decided. We're a brave family. From the living room, Michael called out, are you two going to share that bread or eat it all yourselves? Depends on how nice you are. Lily called back, giggling. Eleanor watched the girl shape the dough into a loaf, her small hands confident now, after months of practice. So much had changed in the years since that storm. Lily had grown taller, more confident. Michael smiled more easily, laughed more often, and Eleanor herself felt more alive than she had in a decade. That afternoon, while Michael and Lily were outside building a snowman, Eleanor found herself looking at the two pictures hanging side by side on her wall. The first one, the lady who saved me, showed a frightened woman opening a door to strangers in need. The second one, added months ago, showed three people standing together, hands joined, with the words "Our second grandma," written in Lily's careful script. Two pictures, one journey, from strangers to family. Eleanor heard laughter outside and went to the window. Lily was trying to lift a large snowball onto the snowman's middle section, with Michael providing strategic guidance and occasional assistance. Their joy was infectious, and Eleanor found herself smiling. A knock at the door made her turn. Michael stuck his head in, his cheeks red from the cold. Can you come out for a minute? We want to show you something. Eleanor bundled up and stepped outside. In the yard beside the snowman, Lily had written in the snow with a stick, "Best grandma ever." Do you like it? Lily asked eagerly. Eleanor felt tears freeze on her cheeks. It's perfect. You're both perfect. That evening, as they sat around the fire sipping hot chocolate, Lily disappeared into the small guest room that had become hers. When she emerged, she held a rolled-up piece of paper. I made something, she said shyly, for your wall, if you want it. Eleanor unrolled the paper carefully. It was another drawing, more sophisticated than the earlier ones. This showed 3 figures standing in front of the cabin, but this time the scene was different. The sky above was full of stars, light poured from every window, and the 3 figures held hands in a circle, their faces turned toward each other. At the bottom in Lily's improving handwriting were the words "Forever Family." "Oh sweetheart," Eleanor breathed. "It's beautiful. See, there's you and me and Daddy," Lily explained, pointing. "And up there in the stars, that's where your Harold and my mama are, watching over us." Eleanor's vision blurred completely. She pulled Lily into a tight hug, unable to speak. Michael came to stand beside them, looking at the drawing over their shoulders. "That's perfect, Lily Bug, just perfect." Eleanor carefully hung the new drawing alongside the others, creating a timeline of their journey together, from strangers to survivors, to family, from fear to trust to love. As night fell and the temperature dropped, they built up the fire and settled in the living room. Lily dozed off between Eleanor and Michael on the couch, her head on Eleanor's shoulder, her feet in her father's lap. "She's getting so big," Eleanor whispered, not wanting to wake the girl. "Too big, too fast," Michael agreed quietly. "Sometimes I look at her and see the baby she was, the toddler, every version of her all at once. Time moves too quickly. That's why we have to treasure moments like this," Eleanor said. "These quiet evenings when we're all together, these are the memories we'll hold on to." Michael was quiet for a moment, then said, "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." She tensed slightly. "What is it?" "Nothing bad, I promise, just I've been thinking about my work, about how much time I spend in the office, on calls, traveling." He stroked Lily's hair gently. "I've decided to step back, promote my VP to CEO and take a chairman role, something that lets me be more present, more available. That's a big decision." "It is, but it's the right one. Sam always said I needed to find better balance and I never listened, not until it was too late." His voice caught. "I don't want to make that mistake again. Lily needs me, and honestly so do I. I need this." He gestured around the cabin, meaning more than just the physical space. "I need family. I need home." Eleanor reached over Lily to squeeze his hand. "We need you too, both of you." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the fire crackle and Lily's soft breathing. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle flakes drifting past the windows, but inside the cabin, all was warm and safe and right. Eleanor thought about the past year, about everything that had changed. She thought about the woman she'd been, scared, alone, counting down days until death. She thought about the woman she was now, loved, needed, looking forward to tomorrow. "Michael," she said softly, "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up, for coming back after that first night, for seeing past the scared old woman to whoever was underneath." Eleanor's voice wavered but held steady. "For giving me a reason to live instead of just survive." Michael's eyes were suspiciously bright in the firelight. "Eleanor, you have that backwards. You're the one who saved us. You opened that door when you were terrified. You let us into your home, your life, your heart. We're the ones who should be thanking you." "Maybe we saved each other," Eleanor suggested. "Yeah," Michael agreed softly. "Maybe we did." Lily stirred and mumbled in her sleep. "Love you, Grandma. Love you, Daddy. We love you too, sweetie," Eleanor whispered, pressing a kiss to the girl's forehead. As the fire burned low and the snow continued to fall outside, Eleanor felt a sense of peace so complete, it was almost overwhelming. This was what happiness felt like. This warmth, this contentment, this absolute certainty of being exactly where she was meant to be. She thought about that night a year ago, the storm, the knock at the door, the terror and the choice. She thought about Harold and how he would have wanted this for her, love and family and joy. She looked at the pictures on the wall, at the progression they showed. The lady who saved me, our second grandma, forever family, 3 pictures telling one story, a story about fear and courage, about loss and healing, about strangers becoming family. Eleanor had spent so many years afraid of being hurt again, of losing what little she had left, of caring too much and being abandoned. She'd built walls so high and thick that she'd imprisoned herself inside them. And then one winter night, despite every instinct screaming at her to stay safe, she'd opened a door. That single act of courage had changed everything. It hadn't been easy. There had been setbacks and scares, doubts and fears. Her heart had literally broken from the stress of learning to trust again, but she'd healed, and in healing she'd discovered something remarkable. Love didn't diminish with age. The capacity to care, to connect, to build family, it never went away. It just waited, dormant, for the courage to use it again. "What are you thinking about?" Michael asked, noticing her distant expression. Eleanor smiled. "That door. The one I almost didn't open." "But you did." "Yes, I did." She looked at him, then down at Lily sleeping peacefully. "Best decision I ever made. Best decision we ever made," Michael corrected gently. "To knock on that door, to come back, to choose each other, to choose each other." Eleanor repeated, "Yes, that's exactly it." Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the world in white. Inside, the fire burned warm, and three people who'd found each other by accident but kept each other by choice, slept peacefully in its glow. Eleanor closed her eyes, listening to Michael's steady breathing and Lily's soft snores. She felt the warmth of them beside her, felt the security of knowing she wasn't alone, felt the deep satisfaction of being needed and loved. She'd opened a door in a storm, and that door had opened everything else: her heart, her life, her future. She'd been so afraid of the darkness outside, but what she'd found there wasn't danger. It was family. It was home. It was home. It was love. And as Eleanor drifted off to sleep, surrounded by the people who mattered most, she sent one final thought into the universe, to Harold, to whatever forces had brought them together. "Thank you for the storm. Thank you for the knock. Thank you for the courage to open the door. Thank you for bringing me back to life."